Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our June 12th Guang San Dapu Yaji. Before we start, let me quickly remind you to mute your mic during each presentation if you are not the speaker. You are welcome to ask questions during the Q&A time after each presentation. You can also use the discussion room to type your comments or questions. We are recording today's Yaji with YouTube live streaming. If you want to review, you can go to our official website to find the recording. Today you are going to hear at least 4 different versions of Guang San, from the Ming Dynasty to Qing Dynasty. In the past few days, there have been some email exchanges of questions and answers about Guang San. If you are interested in reading the discussion, you can check out our official website on the page of June 12 Guang San Dapu Yaji. Now, the first speaker is Mr. John Thompson. At our Yaji last month, John played some sections of 神奇秘谱 Guang San. Today, he will present the complete piece. Welcome, John.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share a screen.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm basically going to play the piece, and I understand I've got 20 minutes, but I'm going to have to cheat a bit because I did a recording and it's 24 minutes. So I'm not going to say much. I hope there's some time to talk about it afterwards. I just what I have on the what you can see now is my interpretation. Wait a minute. Sorry, expressing the true significance. And there you see an outline of the 6 sections. I go through the modal prelude, small preface, grand preface, main sounds, concluding sounds, and postscript. And note that when playing Guang San, and especially while memorizing it, I've often had this structural outline in mind, as well as the more detailed comments on each division, which you can find afterwards following the links there. Associating this outline with specific motifs helped me to remember the whole without having constantly to refer to the tablature. But although this structure is still in the back of my mind as I play, I can point to few specific musical phrases connected to specific themes or titles in the titles or story. And further to what I mentioned above, I don't see that the music is a sort of tone poem giving specific details of the story. It's more of a metaphor, and this last sentence I just added partly after reading or trying to read the article that has just circulated by Ding Chongyun, where he says that he thinks that the story of Nie Zhang being attached to Guang San is a Song Dynasty edition, that it really should be about Xikang and his thoughts. Although it's not clear from me whether he thinks any of the music actually comes from Xikang. Anyway, let me see if I can play it. Okay.
That's amazing, John, to play the whole complete piece.
It's a great piece. What I'd really like to do is try to play one of the ones from Silu Tang Qintong. But that would be very daunting also, even more daunting maybe. Because this one I was able to follow Guan Pinghu when I first learned it. I don't think anybody has done the ones from Silu Tang Qintong.
That's right. Not even I have. Because of Guan Pinghu's influence, the 神奇秘谱 version is the received version today. So if you compare it, which I will do next round, it's a lot more chaotic. And John, you mentioned something about if we could trace the genealogy or the components and contrast between the 神奇秘谱 one and the 西路堂 one, we should have some pretty interesting insights, I believe you were saying on the page.
Yeah. But then after that, I'd really like to understand better the article that was circulated that I mentioned by Ding Chung Yun, where he says that he thinks that the idea of the connection with Nie Zheng is coming from the Sung dynasty for a reason that I'm not quite sure that he explained. I know that makes it popular today because I believe that this was, I assume Guan Pinghu did this Shenchi Mipu one because it was the oldest one, and that he really wanted to focus on that maybe because of this idea of equating the first and second string being tuned to the same note to the people and the ruler have a kind of equality.
But if anything, it shows that early Chinese music, as we progress away from Han Dynasty conventions, because this was supposedly a piece that was played by Zikong or passed down through Zikong, and it disappeared for a while. It went back onto the record in the Sui Dynasty imperial records, and we don't know what happened in the middle. And then came the Ming scores, which we have received today. So what happened in this process? And from what we see in the existent records, there are several versions of this piece. So I would like to know the dynamics between version, the authority of each of the books, and what it does to lasting effect today. I want to talk about that in my section in a bit, but I guess I won't spoil it until later.
Okay, that just reinforces what I've always said, which is that I think it's really hard for us to comment on this music until more of it has been reconstructed.
But on the other hand, I find it a little hard to believe that, according to what Ding Chengyun was saying, that Chu Han, or taking the king of Han, as we usually like to translate it, is the Han is not really the king of Han, but actually Prime Minister Han.
Do you know,
was it? Of
you
the
know what
song?
Google
I
Translate-
find it a little contrived.
You know what Google Translate says it is?
What?
King of Korea.
Of course. Because they can't tell the difference between Korea and Han, the state
Right.
in China. But yes. No matter how, I find those stories a little hard contrived as justification for why does this story sound so out of place? So why is it montaged together rather than a straightforward progression of the story of Nie Zheng as we know it?
Well, that's I tried to comment on that last time, and it's on my site about I think that the core sections, according to the analysis I understand it, which are the third and fourth sections, the Zhengsheng and the Dashu and the Zhengsheng, they are fairly chronological if you just switch around those three sections that I mentioned, and that is quite. If that's true, it's very puzzling why those three sections are put out of chronological order. When I was arguing with a friend about this, he was saying, well, maybe this is a kind of avant-garde thing. But then the avant-garde thing maybe is the Wansheng and the Hoshu, where they do scramble the things around. Maybe that was kind of I don't know, not avant-garde, but impressionistic or something.
Or rather that it was described as a story that happened first and then retold later kind of thing.
I don't know about retold, but just impressions, because I mean they told the story already in the first 36 sections or 30 whatever it is sections. So what was there left except to sort of reminisce here and there? Whatever it is, I enjoy playing it. I love the music.
Mm-hmm. And it's also the received version that I play. So thank you very much, John.
Do you change the notes to the minor thirds that I talk about?
I play it here and there. It depends on the day and mood. Really.
I added in the mention there of Ding Cheng Yun, where I mentioned it there. I found a recording of his daughter playing the first 36, whatever the first 4 divisions.
And it's to the end of Zhengzheng, that's 28.
The end of, right, 28, okay. And then you can see Ding Cheng Yun himself sitting in front of her, as though this was part of a performance, maybe where the 2 of them were playing. And then, so there's a recording of her playing. And I suspect, I don't know, I've heard before people just play those 28 sections. And the justification being perhaps that the Wansheng and the Hoshu came later. So they're just playing the original, although the original, whether that included the preface, I don't know. But I, as I was thinking, I was listening to it, I was wondering whether this was supposed to be a demonstration of the piece being more inspired by the thoughts of Xikang than of the story of Niezheng. But I hope somebody will read that article carefully and give us some more insights into what he has to say.
If anything, I find the story of Yuan Xiaoni listening in to Xikang, and because he found out and cut short after the Zhengzheng, to be a pretty powerful story, if not the right story, as to explaining why the important part of the story ends after Zhengzheng, in that the Luansheng and the closing is added on by later composers.
And I would think, this is Ben, by the way, sorry.
Ben.
Hi, my feeling is it could be the last 2 sections, they are basically different version, and they just stitch it together. Maybe it's just 2 different pieces. And even maybe this piece maybe was not original either. You know, I just feel, because we don't have the proof, you know, we couldn't trace back all the way back to that early. And plus, Ji can talk about 生无哀乐论, right? Like the one which is the music has no sadness, has no happiness. You know, so I found it hard to believe that he will do a piece that has so many stories and attached to a piece. You know, like for me, because recently I study I follow a course by a professor from Central Conservative China. She specialized in the Tang 28 mode. So based on her, so I started to realize there are many. She studied many old texts from the old sources. She traced so many things, but then I found out that it's actually a phenomenon that the miswritten words, you know, like when one text is said about these things, and after 5 versions, it will be completely different things. So based on how copyists copy the old books, and there are many information could be lost. And plus, all the copyists or the later dynasty, maybe they don't have, you know, complete musical training. So they don't know, at that time, for example, Ming Dynasty, they couldn't, I mean, I would say lots of people don't really know what people wrote about in Tang Dynasty already. So basically, and plus, you know, based on the handwritings, different type of handwriting, and so many information could be lost. So it's not uncommon to find a piece that has 2, I mean, definitely not uncommon to find a piece have so many versions, definitely. But it's not uncommon also, it's not uncommon to find a piece which could be a 2 earlier version just stitched together. You know, it has no beginning or the end. So, I mean, for me, when I play the whole pieces, Guang Ling is obviously you feel the same, right? Like in the last 2 sections, I feel like could be its own piece. I had a feeling like it could be a small piece, much smaller than the first, 3 like Zheng Zheng piece. Perhaps I'm guessing maybe just a different piece and just put it together. I mean, or it could be composed, to add it to the previous version.
I think this is one reason why I resist the term compose, because I really think these pieces were created by people playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody writing down and saying, this is the structure that I want. And that lends to have a somewhat looser structure, perhaps. And I think that also that a way I would understand the difference between the神奇秘譜 version and the西土堂琴統 versions is that somebody was doing what we call Dapu of the Guan San. He was playing it from the score. There wasn't anybody who played it, so he just tried to play it as best he could. And he then wanted to play it from memory. And when he was playing it from memory, he naturally changed it to his own way of playing it. Exactly. And then somebody transcribed it, and that's how it came to be different.
Yeah.
Yes, the Silu Tang Xin Tong version is vastly different, which makes me wonder what the heck happened exactly during the Song and Yuan transition. Because we can see from the 3 versions of Guangling San that we have, the 2 of them being in the Silu Tang and 1 in神奇秘譜, is that the 2 civilian versions that were recorded in the Silu Tang are vastly different and highly fragmented as compared to a much more coherent version that was found in the 神奇秘譜. And what happened was that all 3 of these versions became authoritative in their own way, became reprinted in subsequent copies, and then that was that.
I don't know that the Silu Tang Chintong versions were ever. We only have those 1 versions, copies from the Silu Tang, and I suspect that it's quite possible. I assume that there's an awful lot of Qin music that was written down that is lost, and if that's true, then quite likely, considering the variation in the Silu Tang Chintong, there are other versions that just haven't survived, and they might be sort of transition versions from one to another.
Yes, which makes me all the more worried about the Song Yuan transition, because as we know, most of our received pieces have to be ranging from at least the 神奇秘譜 forward. There's no Song Dynasty Qin manuscript that's surviving today. Where is our Zixiadong? It's not here anymore.
Right.
We know that it's like the Tower of Babel, and people took fragments of it and put it into Ming manuscripts, but we don't have the actual book itself. And makes me wonder if Zixiadong, the biggest one, is gone. What about the other smaller ones that may have been written during the Thompson period?
Right, and I don't think we'll ever know that, but I think it's accepted maybe that Julian was trying to find old tablature. He had people going around, and I suppose one could argue that if he actually found things from the court surviving in Hangzhou or something like that, maybe he would have written it down somewhere. So we don't really know, but I think there's a good chance. I think there's a good chance he was copying Imperial Collected or something like that.
Meanwhile, we do know that the Wang Zhi, the author of 西土堂琴统, collected in his Anhui, as well as Jiangsu, as well as going as far as Shandong to collect pieces. So we know he has been going up and down that coastline and collecting civilian pieces, which shows in, well, there's also some quirks inside this piece. So are they really different, or are they just a playing style or quirk that was found specifically to Wang Zhi's specific school or lineage of playing? So there's a mix of certain factors in there that obfuscates the whole idea of this voice of difference that's found in this book.
Are you going to talk about some of these quirks in your?
Yes, I will.
Okay, great.
When I make a remark from a different direction, there might be a different perspective in the historiographical context of the story. Because if you look at Sima Chen's postface to the collected biography of assassin retainers, he makes it very clear that he's selected these stories because of the virtues of the assassins. So in a sense, if we view these as stories about virtue and not stories about violence, and we think about changing views of virtue over the historical period we're looking at, I wonder if that could help account in a different way for some of the variations.
Do you think the ancient imperial constitution gave people the right to carry arms?
That's not what I was saying, but Sima Chen is quite clear about his reasons for collecting. There's actually, I think it's 5 assassins who were collected in that chapter, and he makes it clear what his principle of selection was. He wasn't just collecting stories about assassins; he was collecting stories about virtuous assassins.
It would be nice if Xikang had ever written anything about.
Wouldn't it? But anyway, it's speculative, but I just wanted to throw it in.
Right.
Lisa, actually, Mingmei and I were discussing this in an ancillary way, and the fact that you cite Sima Chen and his virtuous assassins, I think, is important, because we think of assassins in the West or in modern times, well, not entirely negative, but there is a virtue and a certain heroic quality to an assassin, or shall we say to death. Let's put death first. You've brought the biographical aspect into it, but I'm thinking of the concept of death. And when Mingmei told me about her feeling about Guang San, I revised my opinion about death, actually, looking at it in the Chinese context, because death to many heroes, death to many figures in Chinese history is the death of a hero. You wouldn't merit any.
In other words, the concept of the Chinese assassin is not just one of that of a killer, but also ingrained with the idea of martyrdom, because that's built one and whole and parcel into the Chinese concept.
Yes, well, martyrdom, I would not use that word specifically because it also has a Western meaning. But I'm saying in general that I needed to revise my understanding of death, whether it is suffered or imposed by someone else, in the context of Chinese history. So I think the point that Lisa is bringing up is worth considering. To revise it might change our attitude toward the music, because as I described my naive, ignorant view of the piece that I'd heard played by Wu and Guang, I think that it would be something played upon one's death, and Mingmei thought otherwise. So we had a short discussion. I hope I'm not misrepresenting her, but anyway, I learned something from having listened to the piece and wondered about the historical circumstances. And by the way, John, your website is incredible. I'm just catching up. Thank you for everything you cited and translations.
Considering the story of Niezheng, Ding Chongyun, I believe his argument is that story did not get connected to Guangling San until the Song Dynasty. And I think that he gives some reason, but if he did, I didn't understand it. I just know that my first introduction was reading Xu Zhen's introductory history of the Jutian, where he has an extensive comparison of the story from the Shiji and the story from Qin Cao, which is the one of the not the Niezheng killing a Han prince, not the king. No, Han minister, Han Xiang, not the king, and how that's clearly an inferior story which doesn't make any sense. Whereas the story from Sima Chen shows a grandeur of the assassin, basically.
I think his reason is if you the article you talk about is his recent article, right? I think in his article, I think he pointed out that there's no surviving documentation can prove that Guangling San is related to this story, because his reason is in one of the handbook it has a piece which is clearly with a title, which is the Killing Story. And Guanling Shang, it has another piece titled Guanling Shang. So in that handbook is two separate pieces. So it's clear that on that handbook, the Killing Story is not Guanling Shang. So basically he cites that book. So I think that, hey, we didn't find any documentation, to link that together from that handbook, basically. So the name of that Qing handbook is 琴曲谱录. Anyway.
That's just this listing of melodies, I believe.
Yeah. It's not like a notation. Yeah, it does not have a notation. It's just like how do I say, like a listing of melody. Yeah.
It's an index.
Yeah, index.
I might just add also, for those who haven't played the piece, what happens in Chinese history, whether it's written or maybe musical in this sense, is this term accretion. When things
Stack up.
Like
calcium buildup.
Well, like calcium buildup, but there's something to it. If you want to look for historical sources and footnotes and that sort of thing, well, it's going to be wild, like a Medusa's head. But if you understand the concept in general, I think it should inform us rather than detract from our interpretation. I think Li Bin is the skeptical one. He's if I may say so. You want solid proof, but what kind of proof is proof, if you're a musician, you may not need those details, but I just...
Right, well, okay, I think my argument is, I think as a musician, I tend to not believe in any stories, because I think believing in stories is actually limiting my idea of, imagination, actually. I think for me, it's quite the contrary. So, but obviously if you're doing research, if you are a musicologist, basically we need to study the historical documents, right? So if there is one book we're talking about, have a clearly connection that Guanling Shang is not a killing story, then it's something we can think about, I think, right?
Yes.
So, right. So yeah, I'm not saying that I don't, for me, to be honest, I think for this piece, because the first string is very clear that first string is equal to the second string. And it's very easy to interpret an assassination story. And for me, I tend to believe that is that's a connection there, obviously. Yeah. But I'm just saying that, maybe believing too much in the story could be, I don't think for me is helpful. I mean, from musical interpretation standpoint. So yeah.
It would be interesting to know whether Ding Chongyun or somebody has said anything about connecting Xikang with with the two strings being tuned to the same note.
Right, exactly. But there was no documentation that, in the story about when he died, he played a piece and the two string tuning the same string. I mean, in the same note. Right,
and then the other thing that somebody was mentioning about accretion, I think that's referring to this melody is getting longer and longer over time. And that is generally true, but it's not always true. And I think that I discussed this on my version of my recording of Liu Shui. Liu Shui in the Shenqi Mipu is in the section of pieces that nobody was playing at the time. And so that as with other melodies in that section, they tended to get copied later without change, which suggests to me they were not really being played. If they were actively being played, the melodies would be changing. So after 1425, Liu Shui appears several times, just as copies, and then it disappears for a while, and then it comes back again in a shorter version. And the version that we play today is coming from, not directly from Shenqi Mipu, but from that shorter version, which comes from about 1600, I believe.
There'll always
and
be
then Zhang Kongshan flew it completely off.
Right.
There will always be an exception to a generalization. But I have a question from someone ignorant. That lowering of the second string to the first string, does that occur in any other piece? in
That's the thing. There isn't.
There is one other piece that lowers the fourth string to the third string.
That's BU tuning, isn't it?
Something like that. That's in the Li Xin Ya, I think it's called.
Very different effect. I mean, that is the lowest string and the lowest sound. It's like the E flat in the beginning of the ring. It's just the beginning of sound.
But I
Also need to remind everyone that this idea called Confucian conservatism doesn't really exist until Neo-Confucianism came around. So where are all the other wuqu or the martial pieces? I mean, where's the Gu Xin adaptation of, I don't know, Qin Wang Po Zhen Yue or something like that? So are there any other, is there room for new adaptations in this tuning or other martial pieces that also capitalize on this whole lowering second string, eliminating the sound of yu or shang, depending on how you look at it, and then emphasizing this first, second string, first sound, the gong?
This is somewhat connected, but it reminds me of the oldest Qin handbooks had a great variety of tunings, whereas today there's pretty much hardly any at all. And it reminds me of studying Baroque violin, that there were a whole series of concertos and so forth by, I don't know, Locatelli or something like this, where he's using very different, a whole variety of tunings for the violin.
You're right. When we're talking about external tunings, most of the time today, when we're talking about that, it comes from two handbooks. One is the 神奇秘譜, the other one is the 西麓堂琴統, which we're about to talk. So there are some biases with each book that we have to understand as well. So despite the fact that we have these two very robust sources of external tuning pieces and their modes suggest motif-wise, they're still under a very huge author's bias for the way how each of them are to be played.
Either that or that's just what he was able to find.
Perhaps I could move on a bit more about it. So yeah, the point I was trying to get into a bit in the later is just if you compare with something as simple as, say, Jiu Guang versus Liu Shang in 神奇秘譜 and 西麓堂. So for example, in 神奇秘譜, you have your good old whereas the 西麓堂 received version is so if you remember the difference. Are they originally the original same score and then each author records it down differently because one decided to have creative differences? Or is it that Silu Tong is actually recording a unique quirk from the time that eventually ousted by the official authoritative government-sponsored projects? The discourse is being ousted into history, into obsolescence, or yeah. So that's the kind of question I need to bring out, because if you look at just about every piece in the Silu Tong, they have these kind of quirks that if you compare the same versions with the other manuals, they're not there. But at the same time, the Silu Tong is your only source for a lot of pieces. So when you look at the recordings of those pieces, sometimes you have to wonder if it was in another handbook, would it have been simpler or just different?
I think we can assume that there are a lot of handbooks, a lot of tablature lost from that time. So,
but what is important is that after Silu Tong or after Fengshan Xuanpin, the other manuscripts started conforming. The divide of the differences among the different civilian projects, they start closing in. You don't see
if you do
that much difference anymore.
If you check title numbers or something like that, I think you find also that there are fewer and fewer new pieces. If you look at old title lists, It's just that they were a lot more creative, I think, before the Qing dynasty.
Or that something among the publisher field is constricting it. So something about the act of publishing is constricting the difference or the diversity that's out there. What gets published, what doesn't? I think there's a huge processing there between.
That ignores the question of how much it was out there that we just don't know about. Maybe there was, a very active oral tradition going on, and we just don't know about it because it wasn't written down.
Yeah, one thing I feel Xi Lu Tang Qing Pu is it correct all the minor third and the minor second. So for me, it's a bit later. I mean, obviously there are some pieces we only find in Xi Lu Tang Qing Pu, right? But that could be the ancient神奇秘譜 they don't know about. They couldn't find these pieces at the time. So I think the title suggests that obviously there are pieces in Xi Lu Tang Qing Pu can be older, can be traced to the older time. But even that, I think for me, I think it clearly depict that in that time, the style of Qing playing at that time, which is try to play all the all the 5 notes correctly and try to correct the minor second during that time. So anyway, yeah.
What's the minor second?
What?
The minor second?
Yeah, so the like for example, fret third.
Not the minor third.
Minor third as well, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you clarify that again, Bin? From John's question? Could you repeat that statement, which...
Oh, okay. No, I'm just saying that I do find that Xi Lu Tang Qing Pu is a little bit late. I feel a little bit later. Well, I mean, the pieces, how do I say? It's hard to rephrase what I'm saying. The style which Xi Lu Tang Qing Pu, and to me, I feel like it's a later style than Shen Qi Mi Pu because it corrects the minor second and minor third.
I tend to think that might be true, but I worry that perhaps nobody knows where this minor third comes from. Maybe that was something that came in during the Yuan dynasty.
I think it's from Tang dynasty. Yeah.
Why?
Because I studied actually just this last 3 months. I studied a lot about Tang dynasty, Song dynasties pieces. Is very, I mean, is everywhere basically. Like for example, the Germo.
Sorry, what is everywhere and what kind of
The
material?
minor third in the minor second.
Can you demonstrate?
Yeah.
To make sure we know.
Please let us listen to what this example, where it came from.
Well, so for example, the Germo that we talked about the other day in the Shilin Guanji. So we have this motif. Sorry, I don't have a chin here. Sorry.
Oh.
I have a piano.
Hum it, please.
Can you hear? So this motif, it doesn't sound like right now what people perceive of the Chinese music, right? But it is we found this motif very often. Well, it's definitely in Shen Qi Mi Pu quite often than Xi Lu Tang Qing Pu. And I'm not even sure if the Xi Lu Tang Qing Pu has this motif or not. So, and if you look at the Song dynasty, some pieces, it has this motif. So,
good news, Ben. You will find it when I get to the open air of Guang San. Something I try to eliminate, but it's there.
Yeah. So,
can we hear Eunice playing?
Oh yeah, sure. You should play first.
Sure. Actually, before I begin, I will quickly share a screen, and then I'm back to this. So, can you guys hear me okay from here?
You're not going to perform from there. You're just talking, right?
Just 2 minutes. So, I have a screen here, pardon my 4:3 aspect ratio. Okay. On the left, this is Wu Wenguang's modern score of what basically John just played. That's the Shen Qi Mi Pu adaptation because it is received adaptation that everybody plays today. The right is the Xi Lu Tang琴统 Guang Ling San version 1 and the opener. The reason why this is on starting on section 2 rather than section 1 right here, opening, is that you'll realize section 1 of the 2 pieces don't match up. You'll realize that the opener for Guang San in the Silu Tang one starts from section 2. If we follow John's advice, if you look at the Man Shang Yi, the opener tuning motif at the beginning, that serves as the opener for Guang San here. So we go down to version B, here, You Xin Pu, and then you'll see there's another Man Shang Pin here before entering the Xiao Yin. So again, there's a different version of an opening just before going to what we recognize as our received versions, section 2. So whenever we're looking at, say, a source text like this, we have to treat not just the piece from the title opening, it says like Guang San, but we have to treat the opening tuning piece as well as part of the whole thing. So thank you, John, for telling us that. And then the next part would go into the comparison of, let's see, right here, to see, and then it basically matches with this part right here. Sorry, this Microsoft Word I can't highlight as it is, but you'll notice that there are some distinct differences right off the bat, in that there are these heavy non-pentatonic tones that are in there. And we will be listening to some of that. So no, I'm not going to be playing the whole piece. It gets rather long that way. But I will be highlighting some differences, which I argue I don't know if it's simply the difference between court versus civilian transmission, or if it's just the quirk of Silu堂琴统, because we know from comparing versions of pieces that were in Silu Tang, like Jiu Kuang versus Liu Shang, we know that Silu Tang has weird quirks like that. For example, as I said, Jiu Kuang is just, but no, the Silu Tang like that, or into. So it's very different. We know that Silu Tang likes to throw a side punch. So I guess I'll start by playing just section 2 of Guang San, the received version, and then the Silu Tang one. So section 2 would be, let's see. Yes. Okay, that's section 2, which will then, if you look at the Silu Tang version, right at the start, that literally labels Guang San, Xiao Xu, and 3 sections to that. It will start off like this. It starts at the same tone. Quite different, isn't it? So next section will be that section in the received or 神奇秘谱 version, and in Silu Tang it's And that's the beginning or the end of the small beginning, the 小序. So you hear traces of highlights from the 神奇秘谱 version, but at the same time, it's very different. So I think the reason why this piece is still what it is, like why 广陵散 is still called 广陵散, is that you have those highlights of the same themes, but everything else, how it links up to it, are completely different. So these things keep it as what 广陵散 is, but at the same time, you have these are unique to itself because it has this really weird. If you press on 11 at third string, which is an A, or in this case a U, for some reason it matches to an open 6 or pressed 9th at 6. So this is weird to me, but then it exists. So that's why I wanted to share with you in that I find really weird. One who practices the received version of 广陵散, and it was very difficult for me to get out of that shell or that sort of familiarity and work with something that looks similar but really is quite different. Should I move on?
Well, your so-called different is still
Yes.
within certain parameters. To someone who hasn't played and to listen, these are minor differences in the overall.
Well, to me, it's quite major, actually. In fact, the resemblance is less than 40% for these pieces.
Not in the overall sweep of things, though. I mean, you're talking about such a long piece.
Not only that, modern playing, for example, the recording of Guan Pinghu and Wu Guang, they, because of like middle of the 20th century, they interpreted Diezhen instead of what we do today or what I teach in my textbook now as like that. They played it as like that. So it's 4 sounds instead of 2. So what you get in the next section, for example, in the opening of the Daxu, the great opening. So let's see. This is the received version. In the 西土堂, it's simplified and more fudging it through. So yeah, it's something quite different.
Can I question?
Hi.
You're comparing what you call a received version. So you're not really comparing the Shenqi Mipu version. You're comparing the modern interpretation of the Shenqi Mipu version.
More like when I listen to your performance of the Shenqi Mipu version, I realized that what I'm playing, or the received version, is basically yours.
I changed things from Guanping Hub where he diverts from the tablature. And
but mostly speaking, we're talking about is the Shenqi Mipu tablature, because the sections, the layout, the detail are the same, except for very minute differences like whether it's a major or a minor third. And those I sort of keep in mind. But here, when we're talking about the西麓堂 version, it's a completely different piece of music altogether, with motifs of things popping up from here to there, sometimes in a much more simplified or different manner. So only certain motifs are kept in the section.
Okay.
I agree that actually, I think that it sounds to me are very different. I mean, I would say the differences, there are lots of differences, but I don't think it's uncommon. We have within two Qing book has two different, under the same title has two different embellishment, I would say. For me, there are, I think the framework is still the same, right? So basically the mode is still the same. And it's very clearly the ending word, the tonal center is still the same. But I think that's the beauty of Qing music, because by every school they have a different way of playing, and that's why I think that's a unique characteristic of the Qing music. The Qing handbook, I don't think is the final source of proof how you should play it. It only indicates a certain style of the school, how people from that time, or even just that circle of friends who play it. And when you talk about, for example, Guan, the example, for me is the two pieces. I mean, that there's more. Basically, that two sections is the same. Besides the西麓堂琴谱, the version, it has more embellishment, right? On the other way. And you can just imagine that, for example, I learned a piece, Guang, like, a pupil learning from master. Then after this pupil become a master, he can start to make some changes and to improvise on the old framework, and which is quite common, and which is actually what I like about Gu Xin music, because it's more flexible, in a way that but obviously along the over the centuries, and this embellishment or improvisation based on the old framework, this embellishment itself become new pieces. Sometimes we find out, then their new pieces are born this way as well. So I just want to make a comment. Yeah, I agree it's different. But the framework I would still think is is the same.
Yeah. But there are a few pieces few handbooks in the Ming Dynasty that are particularly noteworthy of study. One of them is 西麓堂琴统, this one, because it is such a large collection of so many pieces that can be found in other handbooks, yet it is played in a significantly different style, because it adds all these embellishments to a degree where it becomes recognizably another one, because it has an entire additional section of harmonics and a different ending. Or that when you're looking at these two versions of Guang San, you'll realize that, hey, maybe there are several versions or several pieces that are very divergent from each other, yet they're called or transmitted down as Guang San, and they're actively played by different players, perhaps north and south or something, across different provinces. And yet they are received that way.
Yes, what you're both saying is very interesting. I mean, valid. There's really no argument between them, but Binley's use of the word embellishment is very useful because it accrues to Western music as well.
And I got a note of the other book is Li Xin Yuan Ya, another book from the late Ming. And the thing that was interesting about that book is that every piece in that book has lyrics in it. Every last character that it's played, it has a lyric that's sung to it, as well as the only book that also carries 9-stringed and 10-stringed, I believe, Qin music in there. So that's another book worth taking a look at. But you see these kind of like
what was the name of the book again?
Li Xin Ya.
Maybe
I think it's published in 1637.
Someone can write it in the chat for those of us who are ignorant.
But yeah, these two handbooks are worthy of taking a look because they're compiled by scholars who are not in office. So that's something worthy of taking a look. So what's outside the official narrative? I think that's an important part as well, because a lot of this Guqian dialogue in the Ming is so dominated by Ming princes. And having that imperial authority, even if it's not the emperor himself, says a lot about who has the power, who has the discourse in the period, and who gets to be published, and who gets to be kept in subsequent generations, subsequent versions. So yeah, that's my spiel for playing, or just a taste of the西麓堂versions. Sorry that I couldn't produce a full performance of the two versions of the西麓堂for you guys. I figured that would be too long. But I wanted to break down and do a section by section, side by side comparison between what we have probably contemporary of each other. So the official government version, which John played, versus the civilian collected version, which may be divergent.
And I think there's another version which is complete. That sounds very completely different than this one.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that one
talking about the You Guang Sanpu, the version B.
Yeah, do you play it? I haven't never heard it actually.
No, I haven't. But it's in the same book, if anything.
And because I think the one you played, to me, it sounds very similar to 神奇秘谱, the framework.
The theme is there, but the way how it gets there is very different.
Right, it's different, yeah. But I think maybe there's another piece which is completely different, but it's under Guang subtitle. Maybe it's okay.
It's a little closer to the 神奇秘谱, the received one, in the second version. And that's the opener. before the grand opening. So if anything, the second version has some elements that is basically much closer to the 神奇秘谱 one. So if anything, I find the first version to be more fascinating for me because it's so different. It's such a different piece altogether. On the other hand, the B version sounds like it's an ear ripoff of the 神奇秘谱 or the official received version.
Okay, I want to say thank you, Juni, and thank you, John. I think we can move on to the next one, which is me, and I will talk about the Ming Dynasty, late Ming Dynasty, almost at the end of Ming Dynasty, towards the early Qing Dynasty, the Gu Yin Zheng Zong's version of Guang San. And it's very different, so you can hear, but later I will show a recording. But today, somebody's playing something. Okay, so today I will introduce the late Ming Dynasty, Guang Zhen Qu from Gu Yin Zheng Zong. First, I will share my screen so you can see my presentation. Okay. So I will do a little comparison of the 神奇秘谱 Guang San and Gu Yin Zheng Zong's Guang Zhen Qu. This piece in Gu Yin Zheng Zong is called Guang Zhen Qu. I translated as purport of Guangling, but John and Ralph suggest earlier today using like a third of Guangling. And for the Qing playing of this piece, I will introduce to you a great silk string Qing player, Li Xin, from Shanghai, China, and we'll play a recording of his playing of Guang Zhen Qu. After we hear his playing, I'd like to ask what you think this piece feels like to you. Is it about killing or spiritual transcendence or anything else? So we know that 神奇秘谱 was published in 1425 by a vassal prince Zhu Quan when the Ming Dynasty was about 57 years old. Gu Yin Zheng Zong was published 209 years later and was also edited by a vassal prince from the late Ming Dynasty, Zhu Changfang, in 1634. Zhu Changfang was 26 years old then, and 12 years later he surrendered to the Qing Dynasty in Hangzhou and was beheaded in Yanjing, where Beijing is now. Senqi Mipu's Guang San has 6 divisions and 45 sections, while Gu Yin Zheng Zong's Guang Zhen Qu has only 2 divisions and 9 sections. There are titles of the 2 divisions. I suppose the Guang Zhen Qu is the name of the whole piece, as at the end it says the end of the 9 sections of Guang Zhen Qu, but not the end of the 9 sections of Guang San. We can see here that there is the title Guang Zhen Qu. Zhen Qu means real, interest, purport, assert, and below is the name of the man shang, lower the shang string mode, and kaizhi, open fingering. I think man shang diao kaizhi is the title of the 1st division, and it is functioning as a prelude and a warm-up piece. similar to 神奇秘谱 调义. Then below this title is the tuning method. Lower the second string to the same tone as the first string. Then the second division is called 广陵散, with a little note below that says a divine piece of 慢商, and the name of the composer, 姬淑叶. 淑叶 is the courtesy name of Ji Kang. Then there is no title of each section. The notation in 神奇秘谱 has some literature notation left over, while Gu Yin Zheng Zong is all abbreviated notation. 神奇秘谱 has more complicated right-hand techniques such as 尖钩、笔娟、换指、圆楼, etc., while Gu Yin Zheng Zong's 广陵真曲 does not have those complicated fingers. Even though Gu Yin Zheng Zong's 广陵真曲 is using the same tuning method as 神奇秘谱's 广陵散, I feel this piece is very different from 神奇秘谱. However, I can still see a few similarities with 神奇秘谱's 广陵散, such as the often usage of 拨拉 first and second strings of the right hand in Gu Yin Zheng Zong. Here on the right, I have a page of 神奇秘谱's 开指 open fingering. At the end, it has the 浮滚 technique, which also used a lot in the rest of the piece of 广陵散 in 神奇秘谱, especially at the end of many sections. And also from John's recording, you can see that. Here, you can see from 神奇秘谱, the end of 开指, there are the small characters saying 乃拨拉声. 浮滚 is the sound of 拨拉. Gu Yin Zheng Zong's 广陵真曲 use quite a lot 拨拉 technique on the first and second strings. I will demonstrate that later. And then at the 开指 of 广陵真曲 from Gu Yin Zheng Zong, there is a long phrase which seems to be taken from two separate phrases of 神奇秘谱 指习 of 小序. Here I put red lines on the phrases. You can see on 神奇秘谱 it is indicated as 浮滚. Here, 浮滚, right? 浮滚 1, 2. On the Gu Yin Zheng Zong is 拨拉 1, 2. Here, 拨拉 1, 2. I will demonstrate the Gu Yin Zheng Zong's phrase first. So, 拨拉 on the 11 hui 1 and 2. So here you can see that's the Gu Yin Zheng Zong's phrase I just played. And then from 神奇秘谱小序指习 there's one phrase here. 11 hui 浮滚. And then it seems taken from another phrase from here. So that comes out like these two phrases of Gu Yin Zheng Zong. So, next slide. Another similarity I see is the usage of overlapping tones. For example, in 神奇秘谱 大序, there is this harmonic phrase. 7 hui 娟 1, 2. 双弹. Okay. And in the Gu Yin Zheng Zong second section, there is the open string phrase playing on the first and second string, okay, which is here. let's continue. So to me, they have the same motif, but different colors. And as I mentioned before, Gu Yin Zheng Zong's Guangling Zhenqu use a lot of bola. Here is one example at the end of section 4 and the beginning of section 5. It says repeat. Okay, this is section 4 and section 5. Repeat the bola 11 times. I have not seen a bola repeat that many times before. So those are the few similarities I found between 神奇秘谱 and 古音正宗. Now I'd like to play a sound recording from this great silk string chin player, Mr. Li Xin. Li Xin, 2 months ago, he dapu and recorded his playing of Guangling Zhenqu. I heard it on WeChat and really liked his interpretation, his rhythm and nuances. I asked his authorization to share his playing with my New York Chin Society friends. He very generously agreed. Mr. Li Xin is from Shanghai, China. He plays silk string qin. He started learning the guqin at age 23 with Madame Guo Xuelu. Li Xin has known Madame Guo for 21 years and has been learning the qin with her for 18 years. Madame Guo Xuelu is 95 years old now. Now let's listen. So let me find that. Let me stop sharing and then find the video and share again. Okay. Here. Okay, so at the end of my presentation, I have put down a list of words that have been used to describe Guang San, such as You Ming, You Yuan, Yong Yong, Jiang, Lei Ting Feng Yu, etc. And the sound of drumming from Wang Di, who described that those overlapping sounds are imitating the drumming. I'd also like to mention that not too long ago on May 25 this year, there was an article posted on You Xin, which is a Chinese instant messaging social media. The article is a thesis by Qing Master Ding Chenyun, who wrote Guang San Ben Mo Bian Zheng. Guang San, the whole story distinguishes right from wrong. And long story short, Mr. Ding thinks that the Senqi Mipu's Guang San is not about killing, but about freedom from bondage and pursuit of spiritual transcendence. Despite those adjective words and studies, listeners may have different feelings as well. How do you feel after listening to Li Youxin's performance of Guang Zheng Qu? Is it about killing or spiritual transcendence or anything else? Thank you.
Hi, Peiyou. Alan here.
Hi, Alan.
I just wanted to ask what your feeling is. I think it seems like it's very at some point very meditative, because it just goes on without any abrupt stops or anything like that.
Yes, to me.
就是好像有点平和的感觉。
Sorry， 有一点怎样？
Does anyone know more about the Gu Yin Zheng Zong, like who wrote the handbook, or if it's used by a particular school or anything? I look at the date of the thing and I go like, is this one of those Zhe Pai trying to overwrite the traditions and aesthetics of the others, the whole cultural war going on at the time? Another sign of that? Because as you know, Yan Tianchi was a person who basically started the whole chin playing should be just chin playing instead of singing. The whole Qing Wei Dan Yuan thing started pretty much around then. And as you know, the Zhe school is the granddaddy of all the existing Qin schools today. And it wiped out, as I was saying earlier, on the Jiangxi school, the school that, like Li Xingyuan Ya and its pieces, every song is sung to lyric, and the earlier schools from like the Song and before, which focused more on virtuoso playing. So is this a part of the cultural revisionism at the time? Right. Zhu Changfang, yes.
The two pieces are certainly so different. I wouldn't even associate them as music.
Because you mentioned that he was sent up from Hangzhou to Beijing, right?
Yeah.
Hangzhou is it's Zhejiang. So it's definitely part of the Qin playing zeitgeist of the time. That there was a new fashion of cleaning out this simplistic way of playing. Think Pingsha Luo Yan. This was the period when it started. So is this zhenqu, which I translate as essentialized motifs, an essentialization or a simplification, and hence rewriting the message and meaning behind what was their received version of Guangling at the time?
The Guangling Zhengshu it's like a prelude to the Guangling San. And I guess it's maybe that's suggesting that it has essential elements of the melody. And you asked about Gu Yin Zheng Zong. That's I've got a page about that. That was compiled by
I'm looking at it.
It's compiled by a prince, Du Changfang, who's famous for making chins, a lot of which have been pirated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
also known as Prince Lu Wang.
That's right. Yes.
Right. See, that's exactly the thing. The period which he lived in, and the fact that he lived in Hangzhou, meant that he was part of that founding of the Zhe school playing zeitgeist. That they were simplifying things down at the time.
I would also like to comment that it's not only about the pieces, the notation are very different, but also about the style he plays. The piece clearly has, Bola, or Peiyou talk about, right? If a team player just follow the traditional, I would say from Guan Lingpu's style, you can play very fast and very agitated. So I think this is really, I think it's very subjective. It also proved, my observation is we shouldn't really follow the master's play. I think, because it limits our ability to certain styles.
Critically think about a piece or source.
Exactly, yeah. So that's exactly why we're talking about today. If it's killing story or not, right? It really depends how player want to play, I think. I think for me the title doesn't really matters. I mean, even the comment. I mean, commentary might be, but the subtitles. Clearly, I think that's what Peiyou probably would suggest, that this piece, based on his style, the piece is very. I didn't hear anything about, it's more to the killing story or assassinations, right? I don't know if you guys feel the same.
Well, I think Ding Chengyun's article is very interesting to me. He mentioned about 止息, the title 止息.
Yes.
And 止息, it's a kind of like Taoism meditation terms. So I didn't really read carefully. I just read once or twice. But let me share screen again.
Yes, it's a title, isn't it? And it's a kind of breathing, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So according to Ding Chengyun, he thinks it relates to the Taoism meditation. So I think that's quite interesting idea to relate to Guangling San.
Does he cite a source for that information? Or is that his speculation?
He says, let me see if I can share screen here. Okay, he says 魏晋人题广陵散美与子息相连。如嵇康琴赋中称广陵子息东武泰山，两者显然是两个曲名，但常常被连缀使用。如宋书blah blah blah，三调由玄广陵子息皆与释义，这样频繁的被相提并论，说明两者必有某种共通之处。
So in gist, I'll translate this. Whenever people mention Guangling San in the Wei and Jin period, it's always linked up with this other title called 止息, literally stopping your breath. So as they were mentioning in the Qin Fu by Ji Kang, they're mentioned known separately as Guangling, 止息, Taishan, Guangwu, etc. And you'll notice that Guangling and 止息 are two different titles. Therefore, Ding Chengyun is suggesting that they were originally two separate pieces and that they have very separate and different meanings. So he's trying to split the piece and say that the received version is actually a merge of two different pieces or two different motifs with the continued or added on 止息 version or the section is actually referring to something else, namely to the meditation and stopping of breath there. It goes on to further detail about citing contemporary books like the Pao Pu Zi and so forth, how they were using the term 止息 or breath as part of meditation exercises and so forth. But it's a rather distant relation. Wordplay.
Thank you, Uni. Right. So Ding Chengyun thinks you shouldn't ignore the Guangling止息, the name, the meaning of this name. So that's that.
Thank you, Peiyou. How did you first come across this? And I mean, because it is a separate title from, I mean, not separate. It still has Guanglin in the title, but how did you come across it?
About the title?
Well,
Zhafuxi's index lists it together with Guangling San.
Index.
and so you were exploring all Guanglin San pieces in general, and then you came across this one and decided to explore it.
You mean the Gu Yin Zheng Zong, the one I present?
Yes.
It's just there's only this four different versions so far we can see. The next one will be Julian Joseph's presentation, and so I decided to take this one because it's shorter. It's not the 神奇秘谱 and not the 西麓堂琴统, so I decided to study this one.
That's a reason. I mean, it's not having seen, well, thank you for giving us the pool and all of that. The piece is so different from the long Guangling San that I was listening to, and people talking about killing and martial, using the word martial with a piece like that, it worries me a little bit. So when I heard this version, I thought there's something to this too, because if, like Binli says, we shouldn't even listen to the stories or the titles. We should just face the music as it is.
Yeah, but this has to do with who's playing too, because if you listen to Wu Guang, for example, and you listen to I was discussing this with a friend who was listening to these old silk string recordings I have. He said he listens to that and he can't imagine that it has anything to do with killing. It's gentle. And that's why a lot of players in modern China say you can't play Guangling San with silk strings. You got to play with metal strings.
Okay.
Yeah, and
player makes a difference. Yeah.
And the lower second string to same as first string just musically, it's just to strengthen the bass tone, and that can mean anything, right? It can mean drummer sound, or it can just means you settle down with yourself when you do meditation. You can explain everything.
Like a bell sound, low bell sound could be.
Right. So, so that's my presentation, and then I think we can listen to Julian's next version, which is from Qing Dynasty, very similar to this one, this late Ming Dynasty one, but still different. So, Julian, right? Okay.
Yes, yes. The Xian Guan versions are actually based on the Gu Yin Zheng Zong version, and it's quite interesting to see to hear and see how it differs. I certainly agree with you. It doesn't sound anything like Killing, and my initial impression of this version was the same as yours. It seems to have very little to do with the神奇秘譜 version, apart from using the same tuning. There are in fact two versions in the Xian Guan Xinpu, and the first of them is actually called Guang San Zhen Chu, and I translated that as the true essence of Guang San. But anyway, the Xian Guan version is a very short handbook, and it contains the repertoire of a Qing dynasty Qin master called Zhang Ruishan, who lived in the 19th century, and there were four original compositions, a couple of pieces for pipa and gu qin with gongche notation alongside the tablature, and these two versions of Guang San. They're both divided into 10 sections. The kaiju is omitted in both of them. So they begin with section 1 in Gu Yin Zheng Zong, and much of it is almost identical, apart from relatively minor variations. The major difference is in the organisation of the sections. They've been split, and section 8 of Gu Yin Zheng Zong seems to be missing in both versions. There are a few tonal differences, one or two of which are the differences from Guang San Zhen Chu are then dropped in the second version, which is called Guang San Xinpu, a new score for Guang San. I think at this point I'll play the piece. I only play the new version. I learned that one basically because it was easier to understand the score. There are a few tablature symbols in the older version that I never managed to decipher. So this is Guang San Xinpu, which is Zhang Ruishan's version.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention was that in the Guang San Jian Chu score, the person whose score that was based on was a man called Wang An Ho, the Qin master of the early Qing dynasty. He put in text against some of the sections indicating how he thought they should be played. So for section 1, he said the latter part should be played very slowly. Section 2 should be played very slowly, it's plain and remote. Then section 7 should be even slower. And he said that section 9 is a peaceful depiction of a feeling of remoteness. All those things, none of those things suggest the killing theme to me. So I think it's quite unrelated to the usual.
The meaning has been completely overwritten.
Yes, in fact, there is a piece of text in the preface to the second piece, which says that when Ji Kang was executed, it was not actually Guang San that he refused to teach and that died with him, but another piece called Taiping Yin.
Right. I read from Wang Shixiang, I think. Wang Shixiang's article also mentioned that.
All right.
Taiping is the piece that Ji Kang played when he was. Yeah.
Does that mean that they were composing the piece, that Ji Kang composed it upon his before his death, or was he playing something that had existed earlier and chose that as a means of finding peace? I mean, it's the title, if we are to accept titles, shows an acceptance of death rather than a defiance of death.
Well,
I'm just looking at the title, asking you about the
that isn't addressed in the text in the Shen Guan Qinpu. It just says that this piece will die with him. Whether it's a pre-existing piece, it doesn't imply that he created it at the time. So my assumption was that it's a pre-existing piece.
Thank you. Have you heard it played? Is it played often?
No, I'm not aware that it's in existence now.
Waiting to be recovered and recomposed.
Probably recomposed. It may be one of the many pieces that exist as a title only.
Whoa.
The last two, Peiyou's and Julian's, show that there's a whole other dimension to this famous title, kind of legend. I mean, if one, in reviewing this, I just went to Google to look at the most common thing that came up, and of course there is this accretion of I don't want to even call it legend, but there are certainly stories, everyday stories, that would have been transmitted. And I think it's really important that there's this other dimension.
On the other hand, I find the whole process to be very duly confusion. Namely, their
We don't have to
particular penchant for 断章取义, or taking a section and taking the meaning. And in Confucius' particular section, he recontextualized the concept of the Shijing as with one of its lines, 事无邪, or think no evil. But of course, if we know the original line in the Shijing, it actually was referring to the neighing of horses. So it's a completely different meaning of the words. But then he took the original line, which was referring to something else, but took the meaning of the words in a completely different way and repackaged it as something else. I think this is a perfect exercise in that. with this Guangling Zhenqu right here.
Well, since you call it Confucian, you this is just a footnote. You must be referring not to Confucius' time, but to the later commentaries, Zheng Xuan and so forth, right? That's Southern Song. Maybe it plays into some other commentary that people have made about it being just school. That is
right. So in a way, you can say that Guangling Zhenqu is a commentary or an act of essentializing as commentary or political repurposing. Pick what you will.
But again, I also think some can play the earlier version, like 神奇秘谱 version or 西麓堂琴谱 version, in the same manner of what Julian or Li Yuxin play. So that would be someone could have played the early version in a much slower manner, right? Much more relaxing manner, which does not resemble anything about assassinations. So I still don't think it's about the later dynasty, which has like they try to repurpose. But obviously, because I don't know the story, like the political story on that time, it could be, right? But it also has something to do with who plays it as well.
Mingmei,
May I
do you
say
have
something? Or
who's
Hi,
this is
Mandy.
Mandy. Hi, it's Mandy. Hi, Julian. That was beautiful. I love the pacing. I was just thinking to myself the whole time you were playing. I love the pacing, and then at the end you read those instructions. So after you played, and that just making it remote and slow and slower. I think the beauty of the chin is brought out to its greatest height when it's played at that pace. That's just my personal opinion.
Those instructions actually applied to the older of the two versions.
Oh, really?
In the newer version, he had no text whatsoever.
Oh, I see.
But I tried to apply it. But I also felt that the way he'd done the score, some parts just felt as though they ought to be played a bit faster.
Very nice. I had one comment in general, and that's just like, I haven't had much exposure, but what I've seen on videos of the Taoist people, especially like in the Wudang Mountains, and they'll always like have someone playing a chin, and then they'll have someone either doing like swords or some other martial thing. And I wondered, like, what do you guys think? Like, because that's always coming from meditation, and they're like fighting to stab each other. So I just wondered if that puts any light on this, because they're martial, but they're so meditative,
Modern imagery, I still say. Imagery for a
Like movie.
imagined imagery of the past. Yes.
like slow motion sword dancing, but not really.
Ultimately, you are looking at a piece of digitally preserved visual record, which was obviously created in a period where apparati exist. So you're talking about something that is it actually authentically old stuff, or is it actually a modern pastiche or recreation or repurposing of imagery for the sake of modern consumerism?
Because that's all I know with as like paired with the chin. That's all I know that's martial, from my own experience.
Right. And antiquarism is nothing new in Chinese aesthetics. So I would like to keep this as a particular result of a periodized art movement that happened with the Guqian world. It's important to note that this pursuit of the simple, the pursuit of the profound, long and deep styles of playing that we so attribute to scholarly style of playing today, it only started with, say, Yan Tianqi and the Zhe school, and later that blossomed off into various schools, which are the current modern day. And the result of that was the suppression or fading out of other styles of playing in the Qian world that we're just starting to rediscover in the past few decades.
Ah, amazing.
Thank you, Mandy.
Thanks.
Can we now listen Mingmei's comments?
Okay. I did get inspired, so I have something to say. Number one, which really surprises me, is today we have like how many players? 4 players, and play this assassination piece. But none of the players today express any killing energy, 没有杀气. All very peaceful and calm. No killing energy at all. And also no big movements of the hands, and also play rather slowly. Because when I play this piece, I'm very fast and I have a lot of big movements. So what does it indicate? Indicate literary players are very different, because Confucian scholars, right? Because we are so influenced by the Confucian way of thinking, because the Confucian endorsed way of playing is 清微淡远. We all know about that, right? Purity, subtlety, blandness, and remoteness. And this kind of a very bland and peaceful and calm aesthetic style has dominated the Qin music for a long, long time, and this is because of the literati. And the 清微淡远, this aesthetics has a lot of variations. Like another variation is 和精清远, harmonious, tranquil, pure, and also remote. So today, because we are all literary players now, right? We are more or less influenced by Confucianism, and Taoism is the same thing.
All remote as well.
And so we don't have any killing energy at all. And Peiyou mentioned, and not only we don't have any killing energy, and anything is the opposite. We have a lot of meditative energy, right, in the piece. And so Peiyou brought up killing or spiritual transcendence. I think there are a little bit of both, even in the piece, right? Because when someone before dying, they might be a little bit meditative on life. They have reached some kind of spiritual transcendence to kind of what do you call it? How to explain that? To so that he can I can't even think of the Chinese word. Okay, I forget about it. Okay, so anyway, so there's a yin and a yang in the same piece, right? In that piece. So when we move on, because Ma Bin mentioned something like you don't want to be too influenced by all the stories, which I completely agree. Because when we play the music, we judge from the music, number one. And of course, the music, the Guang San, there are a few very, very, what do you call it, climactic sections, which are the Guan Hong, right? And if that 3 climatic section, you still play it with very spiritual or very meditative, to me, it doesn't go with the structure of the music. And on the other hand, if you don't care about all the stories and you just play whatever you like to play with the music, you like to play it as a very meditative piece, which is fine. You like to play it with a lot of feel with killing energy, and I think which is fine. But I think it's the best you have the balance of the two, and that's why we brought up the I think someone brought it up earlier, is the Ji Kang's essay, 生无哀乐论, right? Music does not express music expresses neither joy nor sadness. Does it have any how do you call it? That means, does it make sense? Ji Kang's phrase. Actually, it does. But Ji Kang also look at music from a purely what do you call it? 他是从一个分基处看东西the dualistic point of view, and he look at the music and completely from a physical point of view, and it's just a arrangement of tones, and in that sense, of course, it doesn't carry any sadness or joy. But that's not completely right. Why? Because we are artists. We cannot separate completely. This is just a note. This is just color, and nothing with the emotions. We can't, because we are artists, and this is art. Because he is looking at music from a purely physical point of view. So it's no relation with emotions. But why did he say that? It's not he just say it because he think music doesn't have any emotions. He said it because of his historical background during his time. It's a historical thing. It's not just that's what he look at things. Okay, so I want to I just think of the piece. If you look at music with no that means how to put it, I can put in any emotions that I want. Okay, so it can be spiritual transcendent. Guang San, it can be a killing energy full of. If you look at it that way, so I have a good example, and I'm sure everybody knows about this example, which is the Guan Shan Yue, moon over the Guan mountain. Because the melody is da 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 da, right? And most we sing this piece with Levi's poem, which is let me get to the right tuning. I mean the right tone for myself. 明月出天山，苍茫云海间。This is too high now. 长风几万里，处女渡玉门关. Okay, so and then there is another lyrics which fit exactly into this piece, which is the Ma Qing Lang. I'm sure some of you have heard of it. Exactly the same piece. We have a very lyrical. 明月出天山，苍茫云海间. And then we have this. Ma Qing Lang. You can sing it faster a little bit. 花开花败，为什么你不来？想着他把相思害，你还将带。Completely different atmosphere from Levi's poem. So, which one is the correct one? None. Okay. It just whatever you put into the song. But however, so I think we cannot cut off from the historical background of this piece completely. It's said it's a piece about assassination, and there is some reason to it, right? We cannot take out that assassination killing energy, in my opinion. And I think, and also because this piece is somewhat what do you call it? And no, 反动. Because we have so many 轻微单元 qing pieces, right? All this blend style advocated by the Taoist, by the Buddhist, by the Confucianist. Wu Sheng Yin Jie, of course, it's not all Wu Sheng Yin Jie, we all know that. So this is a what do you call it? 反动. Like kind of a revolutionary piece with all this killing energy, which I like because I think I'm fed up with all the 轻微单元, so we should have some pieces like that. So after we have a piece like that, and the Confucianists still have to play it the 轻微单元 style, I think it kind of twisted a little bit the original meaning of the piece. Okay, so, and I want to bring up another thing is, so we are not literary players, right? We don't have much killing energy when we play this piece, at least those I heard today. Even Guan Pingwu, right, the most famous Jin player, you hear his playing, he has no killing energy at all. It's very, very calm. Okay, so as Peiyou pointed out, it's a spiritual transcendence maybe, so no killing energy. Okay, but I suggest you go to hear Chen Leiji's version. I'm sure some of you have heard, right? Chen Leiji, he is filled with killing energy. You like it or not is something else. You don't have to like it. I myself, I like it. I like it. And also, there is one in between Chen Leiji's very extreme killing energy and Guan Pingwu, no killing energy at all. And one in between is Wu Guang. Okay, Wu Guang is kind of killing energy, but not like extreme as Chen Leiji. Okay, if you listen to Chen Leiji, you go to hear his video. Okay, he raises his hand like that when he plays, which I tell my student not to do, right? Because you're not relaxed. And he holds a huge action, both right hand and left hand, huge action. Why did he do that? I think he wants to get the killing energy coming across. I haven't talked to him, so I don't know. But he played like this. he's all very elevated. All his spirit is very elevated. He wants to get the killing energy across. You listen to Chen Leiji, it's all killing energy. Of course, you don't have to interpret as killing energy, but it's just high energy, very, very high energy, very hyper. his playing. Of course, there is no right and wrong, right? There's no right and wrong. But if you want to interpret it, Guang San as a piece of assassination, and actually I like Chen Leiji's playing. Some people, okay, I don't like his playing because it's too much killing energy, and he play like that. He high, really, his hand movement is all lift as high as possible. He's lifting his energy very high. Instead of no big hand movement. I kind of like this, but sometimes I get tired of it because it's just too hyper, right? And then you have to listen to something which is more calm down. So I think it's just both ways. Let me see what I still need to say. So my point is, if Guan San, the piece is really about assassination, so I like the killing energy actually. And I have some imaginary people that maybe you can have some imaginary person you want to kill, you hate so much. Then when you play the piece, you can feel it, this kind of killing energy. I think that's about it. That's what I try to say. Let me see. Yeah, so this piece, because when we play chin music, especially for literary chin players, we emphasize so much on Qingwei Danyuan, purity, subtlety, blandness, and remoteness. So I think I'm very glad to see actually there is a piece called Guang San, which is exactly the opposite energy. So if you try to play Guang San again, like Qingwei Danyuan, so I think it might be not the original intention of the composer. Of course, we don't know who the composer was, and that's what I think that's about it. That's what I try to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mingmei. And so I think we can kind of call it to the end for today's Yaji. But before we finish, I'd like to mention that first, thanks to John, thanks to Juni and Julian, and on the next Yaji, Sunday, July 17th, we have a panel discussion about teaching Qing in the modern age. So members, if you want to join this Yaji and present a talk, please let me know as soon as it is convenient. So today's Yaji is going to end now. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ralph.
Thanks, Peiyou. Thanks to you.
So, anyone wants to say something?
Thank you, Peiyou, for organizing. I think it's a wonderful.
Thank you for
Thank you.
your comments, Mingmei.
If anything, since next round we'll be talking about learning method. I would love to hear more students talk about their experiences, if anything.
Right.
What they want to see, what they want to hear.
What is the next Yaji about? I didn't pay attention. What is the next Yaji about?
Okay, it's about a discussion about teaching Qing in the modern age.
Oh, okay, I got it. Okay.
Sorry, I have one more question for Mingmei. After I heard all of that. So, do you think for other pieces there's potential to have this energy on the other pieces?
What is the question again?
So, because you talk about you like the Guan San to be in this high energy, right?
Yeah.
Because it fit the title. So I mean that I agree with you because all the pieces, Qing pieces, kind of like very boring, right? So this one highlight the energy. But do you see potentials of that kind of agitated energy in other pieces, which the title suggests is very calm?
You mean, do I see any other this kind of killing energy in other Qing pieces?
Yes, but if like for example a piece like Ping Sha Ruo Yan or Xiao Xiang Shui Yun, do you think you can play? I mean, do you think a different interpretation will work, like with the high energy?
Yes, of course.
Okay,
I play Xiao Xiang with very high energy.
Okay.
My point is, that's the problem with literati, because they have to follow the 轻微淡远, okay? The pure way, subtlety, purity, subtlety, blandness, and remoteness, because that is so-called the standard aesthetic requirement for Qin music. But it's not true at all, actually.
Right. So I think what you say is actually also like, it's my point as well. I think it is very subjective, right? And also like a title could very bland just describe a calmness thing. But if you feel you have high energy on these pieces, you could portray your different energy as well. And I think
you have to look at the structure of the music, not on the title.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Totally.
Very misleading.
Yeah.
You sometimes have the wrong title.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
平沙落雁, for example, okay? 平沙落雁 is, everybody agree, is a very calm, very peaceful piece, very bland. It's not at all. I play 平沙里, that it's a lot of conflicting elements, a lot of high energy in 平沙. It's not like that, in my opinion.
Yes, thank you. There's a difference between killing energy and high energy.
Yeah, of course, I agree with that. But Guang San, I think, but I haven't studied all the Qin pieces. Guang San may be the only piece which about assassination. That means killing energy.
Right.
And I do think it has a lot of killing energy in it. So I play very, very high energy when I play this piece. Not like I play 平沙落雁, is completely different.
Yeah, so if you look at the Zhongxia Guantao talk that I did last Yaji, I think that explains everything, in that if after 10 years of looking at it, and then all of a sudden I have a different way of playing it. And I accredit that to a lack of creativity, or just didn't have the insight from before. So if everything sounds bland to you, it probably means that we as the players or dapuers aren't being creative enough.
But my experience of playing Qin pieces, never one piece is completely bland or 轻微淡远. Never one single piece is like that. It's just the theory. Doesn't mean the practice is the same with the theory. But Chinese love this kind of theory, so they have to kill all the other exciting elements in Qin music, which is not right.
May I also suggest that there are scholars or people who learn the Qin because they are searching for an inner peace. It doesn't mean that they will play everything bland and whatever because Confucians demand it. No, that's a standard that you may have grown up with. But now we're talking about, maybe this will be something to discuss in next month's Yaji. That is...
No, I'm not saying bland is...
When teachers prescribe it as doctrine, that's the problem.
I'm not saying bland is no good. I'm not saying that at all. But Qin music actually has a lot of different styles, but literally like to kill the other style or suppress it. It's so like 轻微淡远 is like always the standard style, but it's not true. That's my point.
No,
it's not saying bland is no good. Bland is very good.
I didn't mean that. I meant that not everyone is abiding by Confucian standards. That's all.
No, of course not. Of course not. It's the Taoist, Buddhist, all kinds of stuff. Of course, and nowadays you go to online, and all this new energy in online Qin playing. They transport different, modern pieces, pop song, all kinds of stuff on online. They jump around. I mean, it's a completely different thing. Yeah, of course. I mean,
Yeah,
the Qin can accommodate all kinds of styles.
I've seen that, and to some it's rather offensive because then you could go and hear rock music in the West. So it's all a matter of taste.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of taste, but I think before some of the pieces maybe get out of fashion, I think we should accept all kind of style, and then if people don't like it or they're not good piece, they will go out of fashion on their own, actually, so we don't have to worry. Bin, did I answer your question? Did you?
Yeah. So I mean, I think what you said basically almost. I agree with your point. I think basically what you said actually kind of in line with as why thinking, because when I play Qin music, the title can be indicative of some story, but I don't think is the final judge. I mean, I shouldn't, based on how I would not interpret it solely based on title, basically, right? So I should look at the music structure, like what you said, and look at other things. Yeah, not just so ingrained in what does the story, not to search what's a real story or not, because as we know, like we don't know what's real story or not.
Yeah, I never really care about the story, but just the feel, the energy.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So some people can play very slow, some people can play very fast. They're okay, I think. I just don't think we should be limited to one certain style. That's it.
I agree. I completely agree. Yeah.
I think you have to be careful about deciding what has energy and what doesn't in modern terms. We don't know what cliches were for old music, and some things that appear to us to be fairly calm might not have been calm to them. Another thing is that I feel that Qin music is not bland at all. I find a lot of energy.
At all. No. But my point, I just want to point out is because a lot of literati Qin players, so-called literati Qin players, not the conservatory trained, they are so influenced by the four words Qingwei Danyuan. So they try to everything has to be Qingwei Danyuan.
I don't think that's true. I think that's true of a lot of them, but I don't think that's true of all of them.
That's not true.
And I think to me the distinction here that I hear is between the conservatory style and the traditional style. And the traditional style to all the conservative players is too bland. But I just disagree.
You mean you disagree that the traditional style is bland?
Right. And I
agree with you.
And I disagree with that the conservatory style is more exciting. It's just, to me, it's just different. It's not.
They're louder, maybe.
It's louder, yeah, but it's not as subtle.
More gestures to excite people. You listen to Chen Leiji, he's very exciting, I have to admit. I mean, you like his style or not, it's something else, but he's very excited to look at. Yeah, he raised his hand like that, which I tell my students particularly not to do because you have to relax, not like this. But his whole playing is like that. But he has his way because why he play like that. I mean, he has his way of doing the Guang San. I mean, if you have a chance, you can listen to his playing. You don't like it, it's something else, but he has his own way of playing.
And as I was mentioning further with the various versions of Guang San that we have explored today, this idea of Qingwei Danyuan is a relatively new invention that it should be periodized into a process of the greater history of Qin performance. So when we're talking about the Confucian ideal or the interest, please note that this is a very late Ming, early Qing to mid Qing kind of trend that was going on, and we should rethink or complicate of the history of Qin styles and aesthetics over time.
Yeah, but I want to mention one thing. Yeah, you're right. However, it has been very popular. Second is, those people advocate this style, Qingwei Danyuan, doesn't mean they play their piece always Qingwei Danyuan. It's just a theory. It's just a theory. They can play very differently, but the theory is, we advocate Qingwei Danyuan, okay? Because it's a Qin thing. You want to be a real Qin person, it's a Qin thing, that's it. So that's why those traditional players, they attack the conservatory player because they're not Qingwei Danyuan. They're far from Qingwei Danyuan. But
so they have different schools and different names.
It's just a theory. It doesn't mean that they even the literary player doesn't mean that they all Qingwei Danyuan. It's not true at all.
But there is this simplification, this struggle between the robust versus the simple. It seems like this is a common theme. They may have different schools, different names, but over the ages, it seems like this is the primary tension when it comes to Qin aesthetics over the different eras. Perhaps worthy of a future talk or exploration, Yaji? Who knows? But how are we doing for time, Pei? Are we over?
Yeah, we're well, sort of over.
Yeah. Almost 6 o'clock.
Yep.
Might I just make a suggestion for next Yaji, if there is time?
Sure.
I think it will also be very interesting for the presenters of the next Yaji to also present tips and basically instructions for new teachers in the future to also, when they start teaching, a few tips for them on how to teach and how they can teach better, and maybe something like that. Besides just speaking about the journey, I think it would be interesting to also prepare a new generation of Qin teachers for their tasks.
Sounds good. good idea. Yes.
Yes, that could definitely be a story. I did start teaching from a student center in the University of Toronto, so critical teaching has always been a theme of mine. So do remind me more about that next time. Yes, I'll prepare something.
I thank you, Juni.
Thank
Okay,
you,
I'm
Jean.
gonna stop the recording at this point. Here we go.
Thank you, Ralph. Yeah, let's stop it now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
And-
you.
The recording has stopped.
Okay. And we will see you again in July 17th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And so, members, yeah, if you want to join the Yaji and give a presentation, please let me know.
Thank you, Peiyou.
Thanks again, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.